Today I had the honor of interviewing Bill Daley. Bill is the son of Richard J. Daley, the brother of Richard M. Daley, both mayors of the city of Chicago. Bill Daley has also served our country as Secretary of Commerce under President Clinton and Chief of Staff under President Obama. In my interview with him, we talk about everything from family history to the Kennedy for Illinois campaign. It was a great conversation. Mr. Daley, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview here today. So you are the son of Richard J. Daley and the brother of Richard M. Daley, who both served as mayors of Chicago. You also served our country as Secretary of Commerce under President Bill Clinton and White House Chief of Staff under President Barack Obama. In a way, history is repeating itself with a Daley backing a Kennedy. What do you think your father would say about your position with the Kennedy for Illinois campaign right now?
Well, I think as my father felt so strongly about John F. Kennedy when he ran for president, I feel very strongly about the individual, Chris Kennedy, running for governor. So it's not just about friendship or relationship over many, many years between the Kennedy family and our family, but it's more about the individual, Chris.
So how do you think campaigns, obviously a lot of time has passed, how do you think campaigns have changed since your father's time in public service?
Well, as the culture and society has changed, technology's changed. You have so much today on social media, which didn't exist, obviously, and the influence of television and radio and other forms of communication are so ubiquitous in our society. But the main differentiator would be the enormous cost of these things today. They are extremely prohibitive for most people from being involved in it.
What motivated you to get involved with Chris Kennedy's campaign?
I think Illinois is at a critical point. Obviously, we have enormous problems. We've had a governor the last 3 years who's been unable to govern and to lead the state, working with the legislature or attempting to work with the legislature. And I think there has to be a serious change and a real difference. And also amongst the Democratic Party and the leadership of the Democratic Party. We need a break from the past in many ways, try to hold the good of that. And I think Chris can do that. I think he's a leader who, as governor, will be able to work with the legislature, but he will also see that there's need in the state for radical change.
Right. Chris's aunt, Eunice Kennedy Shriver, held the first Special Olympics here in Chicago at Soldier Field 50 years ago. The Kennedy for Illinois campaign has had a big focus on the children and adults with special needs. Has this message had traction with the voting public?
Well, I think the community that the Special Olympics and Chris is focused on is well aware of the history of the Kennedy family and their involvement not only in Illinois but globally on the needs of those who have enormous needs in our society. So I think Chris is focused on that. Obviously, there are a lot of people who are friends of the Shrivers, friends of the Kennedys from Illinois that are helpful to Chris. So I think it's a voting bloc that is very engaged today, and that's a good sign for their future and for the future of the state.
So continuing on with questions about Chris's family, you had a very solid relationship with Senator Ted Kennedy. I was told that he always used to say that you love the game of politics and government. Is there anything about Senator Ted Kennedy that you remember the most?
He was about as good of a retail politician I've ever met in my life. He remembered people's names. He stayed in touch with them. He understood the importance of connection with people. And I remember he set up a meeting once when I was Commerce Secretary with the fish industry in Massachusetts, a very important part of that community. And it's a small business, basically. One family may own one boat, two boats, and a very difficult business. They absolutely adored Ted Kennedy because he stood with them. He stood with them because he understood how tough their lives were. He understood that the importance of them to the overall economy of Massachusetts. And the love that they felt for him and the respect he had for them as individuals was something I'll never forget as Commerce Secretary.
So Chris is running a campaign that in his ads and everything has been characterized as running against the political establishment. And he's been characterized as unbossed and unbought. What does that mean for voters in Illinois?
Well, if you like the system as it is, whether it's the governmental system or the political system, then vote for somebody else. I think Chris has a real desire to make change in our political system. The Democratic Party is a great party. It is one that is beyond any individuals. And I think Chris wants to strengthen that. I think he wants to get people more engaged. A lot of people are walking away from the system today. They're less involved in the party politics. And I think Chris's desire is to get them involved, but you have to be an example of that. So again, if you want to change in the Democratic Party, Chris is your guy. If you want to keep it as it is, then vote for somebody else.
What message do you strive to get to voters from Chris that kind of crystallizes the whole idea of the campaign?
I think it's about change, real change, basic fundamental change in the way we do things, whether it's a property tax system, how we fund our schools, things that Chris has talked about now for well beyond the last couple of weeks or months in a campaign, that he firmly believes that there's an injustice in the way we the way we tax people's homes, the property taxes, the way we fund our schools, that is hurting Black and brown and those economically disadvantaged communities throughout the state, not just in Chicago. And I think he feels very passionate about that. So that's the message of change and fundamental change in the way we do business in this state.
And as he says in his speeches, not incremental change, but radical changes.
Right.
So.
You can't, the problems are too deep to try to incrementally. But do not underestimate the difficulty of radical change and the wall that will be put up to stop that. And that's what's going on right now.
And lastly, is there anything that you want to tell voters right now that they might not know about Chris that you think is very important to them that they should know?
First of all, I know him as a friend. He's got a great sense of humor, self-deprecating, doesn't take himself too seriously, somewhat of a style of the Kennedys, knowing other members of the family. But he absolutely believes he didn't have to do this. Right. He did not have to run for this. Some people run for office because they want to be somebody. Some people run because they want to do something. Chris Kennedy is somebody who has been someone by virtue of his family's history. So he didn't have to do this, and I admire him for taking this challenge on.
Mr. Daley, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Good luck to you.